conversation. And for people who were here yesterday, you might have heard the beginnings of that conversation. It was on the panel, Is That Me on TV, with Cheryl Denier and Courtney Ryan and Campbell X. And we began talking there about the representation of butchers and a little bit the representation of trans masculinity as well, and how problematic that has been in the history of image making. Okay, so that was sort of in a way, that was the platform for yesterday's conversation. And today we want to sort of dig into that a little bit further with very specific focus on the work of Kim Peirce. And then we're going to move on to a variety of topics. One we want to discuss is genre. You know, many representations of butchers and trans people have been really in the genre of a sort of drama within which the butch or the trans person is facing insurmountable obstacles and becomes a victim of some sort of hate crime or extreme violence. And one of the things that Kim has started thinking about recently is how and whether you can change the genre up a little bit and do something like a romantic comedy, and what would be lost, what would be gained from thinking differently about this narrative material in a different genre. And there was that one horrible French film, French Twist. Do you remember that? Where the poor Butch had to be punished for having this sort of menage a trois with the husband and wife, and stealing the wife from the husband, and in the end ended up pregnant. Almost, which would not be a punishment, except it really went against character type and so on. So we've seen Butch comedies, but the question is whether the comedy can actually thrive on its own narrative material, or whether it turns into something that allows people to make fun of the Butch image, and then it becomes part of the same kind of archive as the narrative insistence that the Butch die or be maimed or wounded. Okay, so that's one thing that we're going to try to get to. Kim began talking yesterday a little bit about what it means to be an out queer filmmaker in Hollywood, which I'm sure we're all quite interested in, and I thought I would invite her to talk more about that. And we'll even get to the L word, not simply because we must talk about the L word, but because actually Kim shot one of the most sexy episodes of the L word in season 4. And they tried to censor it and tone it down, but to no end. So I think we should talk about that too, and then I'm sure that you'll have questions as well. So we're going to structure it as a conversation. I will do a little bit more of the interviewing. I do want to sort of pull Kim in certain directions, but we'll stage it as a conversation. And what we thought we'd start with was just talking about what it means to be, you know, out as a butch in certain kinds of workplaces. And I'll just set it up by saying something about mine, and then I would love to hear Kim go back to the discussion that she began. The discussion that she began yesterday about her journey in Hollywood around self-presentation. And mine is very simple. I teach at USC now, which is, you know, the University of Spoiled Children, which means they are mostly the sons and daughters of business execs who the university then hopes will give money back as soon as they become business execs. And I teach an obligatory and mandatory class in gender studies that some of the students absolutely have to go through. So I end up with business majors in a class on gender studies. And I don't, you know, try to soft pedal myself as a female teacher in any way. I come in looking as ambiguous as I do, and they have to kind of deal with that. But one of the decisions that I've made in my workplace is not to teach myself. Okay? Now, it's not about not being out, because they already know from looking at me and from the way I talk or deal with them. They kind of know what I am. But what my focus is on what are you in the world of gender and sexuality, because just because you are, say, a white, normatively feminine sorority sister does not mean that you don't have a gender and a sexuality, that it is as performed and constructed as mine, and that we should be talking about it. And when you start talking about things like body issues and eating disorders, it becomes extremely clear to them that there was never anything natural about their subject position either. So that's the thing that I would want to say, is that after many years of being subject A, exhibit A, you know, and standing up in front of 150, 200 students and basically saying, yeah, I read Stone Butch Blues, yeah, look at me, this is what's going on here, I decided, no, let's turn the focus back. And in the end, when you're teaching a large gender studies class, I actually think that's the way to go. We should not endlessly be the evidence for gender variance. We, in fact, should be talking about gender variance across the whole spectrum. Gender variance just describes variations in the expression of gender. So the very, very hypothalamic sorority sister is also gender variant, and that would be the way to sell it. And I have all kinds of other tactics for bringing in the fraternity boys too, but we can talk about that another time. So, and it seems to me that one of the things that Kim's films have been successful in fact, is using the material of transgenderism to force audiences to think and look at themselves. And that was one of the things that Boys Don't Cry was able to do. But I thought that as an opening, I would love to hear Kim go back to some of the things she was discussing yesterday about moving through Hollywood as a butch, and what kinds of compromises she's had to make, and what kinds she refuses to make.
Hi. So, I found myself in a strange